For thousands of years, elders and knowledge keepers have used stories to educate future generations. Stories and words can help heal our hearts and make Mother Earth a better place for all people. This is Healing Hearts.
Hello everyone, I'm Tracy Koga and welcome to Healing Hearts. Well, there is a special bond between grandparents and grandchildren. Grandparents are like the keepers of the family history, the cultures, and traditions. They tell the stories that pass down to their grandchildren and for generations to come. So tonight, we will see if tradition and culture can prevail over technology, social media, and everything that's out there in this world today. So let's begin the conversation on Healing Hearts. Okay, so let's bring in all of our special guests tonight. We have Clayton Sandy, our knowledge keeper, co-creator of Healing Hearts with his handsome grandson, Kieran Marsden. Welcome to Healing Hearts, Kieran. Your grandfather, I know, is going to be talking a lot tonight, but I want to hear from you, your thoughts and comments too. Just a joke. And the lovely Perla Havati, good to see you, Perla, again. We ran into you and you were on our anti-racism video for the city and you spoke so eloquently and so from the heart that I really wanted to have you back again, Perla. And we have Felicity Gutierrez. Welcome, Felicity. Welcome to Winnipeg. I hear that, you know, you've recently come to our city, so I really want to hear what you feel about not only Winnipeg, but the people in your community. And then last but definitely not least, the wonderful Flor Marcelino. Good to see you, Flor. I mean, everybody knows you from government, but you know, tonight it's going to be sharing your story and also how we can connect as a community. But I guess the big theme here is sharing stories with your family and how important is it to pass on family traditions and cultures. So I am actually going to begin with the knowledge keeper and the co-creator, Clayton Sandy. Clayton, I guess for you first, I share your story, which is very powerful in itself, and many of us know it. But again, you know, the hardships and the things that you faced as a child, growing up, and now as a grown adult with family and your grandson, Kieran.
Great, thank you, Tracy, and it's nice to be back on the show again. And welcome to our other guests, Flora and Perla, and Felicity. And I'm really glad and proud to have my grandson Kieran here with me this evening. Maybe I'll just start off. My home community is west of Brandon, called Sioux Valley, Dakota First Nation. My father's from a reserve called Pipestone, Manitoba. I grew up around Army bases just north of Brandon, and my father actually lost his status when he went to World War II. So automatically he became a non-Indian because he joined the war. It's kind of when I think about it, it's kind of just it's amazing how government can create a policy like that. So he went off to war. He was wounded twice, came back, and so he wasn't an Indian when he came back to Canada, but they sure treated him like one. And we grew up around Army bases, and I didn't realize until probably later on when I moved to Winnipeg. I was about maybe 20 years old, and I just started to realize I could see the poverty, and I could see there's some homelessness already. I could see, and I think probably from the time I can remember going to school on an Army base, it just seemed like racism was all the way through my life. It just seemed like being the only Native family on the base, it was just like racism was always in our face all the time. I was lucky to come from a large family, so I had 7 older brothers. They kind of looked after me. But there's many times that again that they weren't around and I suffered a lot of racism. But it wasn't until I moved to Winnipeg and started working and I couldn't figure out out why people around me and even on the jobs that I had when I first moved to Winnipeg, I couldn't understand how come they really dislike Native people and why they'd say so many nasty things about Native people and I had long hair at the time and I didn't I worked in a few different odd jobs when I first moved to Winnipeg, but I went into government in 1976 and the same thing I couldn't get over when I started with natural resources how much my colleagues didn't like me, and I couldn't figure out why they didn't like me, and why they'd make fun of me, and why they would say nasty things about Native people, and it really made me want to want to understand why would they say stuff like that. So it took me a while to figure that out, and of course there was a lot of shame that went with that. So it took me a long time to even feel comfortable about even being even with myself because everybody seemed to around me, always said I was I was a drunk. I was lazy and all nasty things. And for a while there, I was actually starting to believe that because that's what I saw around me. But eventually, when I got my job, I had a hard time staying on my job. I wound up moving many departments because of racism but it was I probably when I was probably around maybe 23, 24, I started getting involved with powwows and I started dancing at powwows. And for some reason, once I started learning about powwows, I started feeling good about myself. I started feeling good about about who I was as a Native person. Started learning, finding other people on the powwow trail and how proud they were, and that's what kind of saved me in a way because I knew that I had something different than everybody else had. And then I started making outfits and I start doing many things. Start organizing powwows, and I met people all over North America. I wound up I danced on Sesame Street once, and I danced for the Queen once, and so I got to travel all over North America as a power dancer. So that kind of really saved me. And probably again, one of my sons danced for a while there, and then of course I had grandkids, and my grandson here, Karen, he started dancing from the time that he started walking, and we have a ceremony called a walking out ceremony. Is for when children when they can first walk and they get their outfit. Um, we the power stops the power. The people at the power give us the whole power arena to ourselves, and I brought Karen out as maybe 11 months or 12 months old in his power outfit, and we danced around the arbor once. Then people came over and shook hands and welcomed Karen into the power arena, and then that's how we bring our children into the power arena just to get to know about power and what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably for the next maybe 5 7 years we traveled probably all over North America, Karen and I and my family, and he got to meet a lot of good people and in New Mexico and Oklahoma and places like that. So that's basically part of it. And I think it's so important for not only children, grandchildren, but to learn who they are. And I'm
Totally.
not too sure. Like, I always when I worked in government, I always wanted to know if racism was still as bad as it was when I was younger. And from what I heard from my boys, it wasn't as bad. And yeah, so I'm really proud that just to be here and to pass on whatever knowledge I have with my grandson here. And he's not only my grandson, but sometimes he's my best buddy. So I'm proud.
Uh, so, Karen, I guess through all of this, what have you learned about your grandfather and your past, and how has that helped you with your own identity as a active grade 9 student in Churchill? I hear you play hockey and everything else.
So as he was talking about powwows, I started dancing when I was around, like you said, 11 to 12 months. I had a walking out ceremony, taught me how to be respectful with elders and how to be respectful with other cultures. And he's also taught me quite a bit about how there was racism
Mm-hmm.
around the world. So he taught me how you're gonna run into some people that will be very racist, and I also had some pretty racist hockey teammates. over the past couple of years I've been playing. So hasn't been too great with some coaches and obviously players. So yeah.
What did you do to sort of, I guess, overcome it? Have you, kind of maybe words of advice, because there's probably a lot of other young players out there too, Karen, that are probably facing the same thing you are.
I just learned how to ignore it and obviously give them a piece of my mind. So
I guess you get that from your granddad too, huh? Well, we'll come back to you, Karen, because there's a lot to talk about the special bond that you two have. I want to go now to Perla. Perla Habate, I mean, you've done so much in the community, and maybe Perla, for you, obviously share your story, but more importantly, how in the Filipino community it is so very family oriented, and to support each other, and how important it is to keep your identity of who you are.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you for having me here. I'm so glad I'm here in Winnipeg because the community we built of the Philippine community here in Winnipeg is very pronounced because it's not a very big city. And you can feel our presence wherever you go, wherever you turn your head. Either you hear the language being spoken or you'll see, a Filipino face around you. And this helps, especially at this point in time, with our young people who are coming in to schools, because now they do have role models. And so it is easier for them to accept their identity as Filipinos. Whereas when I came in 76, and then I started working with Winnipeg School Division in 1984, I saw the struggles of the young people who were in school, because they were new. They're, obviously they came from another country because of the color, because of their looks, because of the way they carry themselves. And a lot of young people were so confused. They didn't know whether they'll own up to who they are. A lot of them were caught up in this struggle, and some of them were identifying with what they see on TV. And so in a way, it is so good that we have a strong community now, so that the new immigrants who are coming in, it's a lot easier for them. It sort of paved the way for them. And I, for one, when I came in 1976, I came with 92 girls coming from the Netherlands. These were young garment workers hired there, but our contract was cut short. So I had to look for a country where they can exit to. And Canada was the country that we chose. And at that time, the garment industry was flourishing. So I was able to get 92 girls into Canada, into Winnipeg. And in 76, everything was, not like this. It was kind of a small city, and coming from Manila and having been to Amsterdam and coming here, that was a big shock for all of us. The silence, it's so quiet, and you hardly see any movement after 6 o'clock in the evening.
And you still do.
Yes, so I guess we survived it by, keeping each other company, and pretty soon we were able to create a life for ourselves. And our way of sustaining ourselves when we go to different countries is we create a family-like atmosphere around us. So we choose the people that we relate to, and then if we feel good about the relationship, then we have a mom, a dad, a grandma, a grandpa. I mean, we assign them these roles. And that's what happened when we were in the Netherlands. We had opas and omas within 3 months. And so that makes you feel at home. even in a strange land. And because family for us is very, very important. It's the foundation of society as far as we're concerned. It's a place where our heart is. It is where we get unconditional love and support. It's a place where we go back to re-energize ourselves every time we go through different struggles in life. I, for one, have always been away from home. I'm the prodigal daughter because when I graduated from high school, I went to the big city on my own. I was, put in a boarding in a residence, went to school. When I graduated, I went to another city to work, and I got a job where I had to cover 11 provinces. So for every travel that I did, every place that I visited, I had created circles of friends. And I always refer to it as my opportunity to develop myself, picking up all the good things that I can from each one, enhancing who I am. And here I am now in Canada, here in Winnipeg. We can't choose a better place because of the diversity that we have, because it's a gift. It's something that makes one really complete. You Other people would go travel abroad to meet other people, whereas here in Winnipeg, they're all around us. We get to enjoy them. We get to appreciate the food that they have, their culture, and it makes for a beautiful place to live.
Oh, wow. Well, we all certainly feel your love right now, Perla. I mean, those were just such amazing words, and I think it has a reaction on Felicity here. So I'm going to go to Felicity because you were smiling away and nodding your head. And yes, again, you've just recently come to our city. So share, first of all, your story on how you came here and what life is like for you now.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I do identify with a lot of the things that Tita Perla mentioned about, just being an immigrant here. So our journey to Canada really started in 2013 because my grandmother, she lives in BC. She's been here for quite a while now. She was nagging my mom to come here because she was like, "Oh, there's better opportunities here compared to the Philippines," and which was true. And so to stop her nagging, my mom decided to just go with the process. And we really weren't expecting anything. We were like, if we get accepted, then we get accepted and we go. And if you don't, then it's fine because like we did have a quite established life in the Philippines. We were quite comfortable, and but there was also there's just that chance out there. So we just let it be. And then in 2015, I think. We got a letter from the government saying that we were approved and we had to do all of these medical processes to get in, and we reached a point when we thought we were actually not coming here because the process was so long and arduous, and it was just such a pain. But here we are. So in 2018, we actually managed to land in Winnipeg. So we got through the provincial nominee program. I believe it was through my father's god sister, so she was her sponsor. But unfortunately, she didn't have any room in her house, so we stayed with someone, with a friend of my parents. So when we landed here in 2018, I was 15 years old then. We spent, I think, a month at my parents' friend's house, and then we found an apartment, and eventually my dad was able to get a job. So in terms of adjustment, like physically moving in, it wasn't that hard. Like we got settled within a month, and but really the shift that we had to make, the adjustments that we had to make were mostly of the mental sort. I had never been so lonely in my life. My first year here, oh my goodness, because of the difference in academic years in the Philippines and here, I had to wait 4 months to get to school. So, so we came here in July, and I was already 2 months into my summer vacation from the Philippines, and so school starts in September here, so I had to wait a couple of one more month to start school, and I was just so lonely at home. But thankfully, my family and I are very, very close knit, and so I would say they were my biggest pillar of support then and also now. But yeah, when I came to school, I didn't find any like there were some difficulties in terms of language because I did speak English in the Philippines. I spoke with my friends, I spoke it at home, but it was always mixed with Filipino, and so a lot of the vernacular here was foreign to me. I didn't know most of the words that they were talking about. Like for example, I remember my friends would talk about Rice Krispies, and they would be talking about like the bars, and had only known of the Rice Krispies cereals in the Philippines, and so I would be like, I had no idea what they were talking about. So that came with time, obviously, um, and now I do understand more, I guess. Um, and in terms of making friends, I would say that it also took a bit of a while. I spent a lot of lunches at the cafeteria alone, or in the library eating by myself. But eventually, I did make some friends. Most of them are Filipino, because you do flock to people who are similar to you. I think that's just normal for human beings. And I think it also really helped that I tried to get into as much extracurricular activities as I could, given the fact that we didn't have a car. So I was very limited in my opportunities. But within my first couple of months, I did join the Gender and Sexuality Alliance at school, which was basically a support group for LGBTQ plus kids in the school, and also we would advocate for our rights in the school, and we would talk about any problems that we had. And as a member of that community, um, finding those people and finding that they were very welcoming and supportive, and despite the differences in culture, in language, that made me feel like I belonged during that time. And of course, eventually finding people, Filipinos as well, that helped me adjust a huge, huge amount. So yeah, I wouldn't say, I feel like my experience in Winnipeg has been quite smooth so far. As Tita Perla mentioned, because of the difference in time, obviously back then it wasn't as multicultural, I guess, and the Filipino community wasn't as big as it is now. And that really helped me, like just seeing so many Filipino faces and hearing so many people speaking that language, and knowing that there was a support system, there were immigrant centers who had programs that we could join, so that we could not integrate, but like feel that we're more part of the community and feel like we belong. That helped so much, and our time here has really been a breeze. Like I thought my life in the Philippines was nice, and it's just so much more liberating to be here. And there's just so many more experiences that I couldn't have had we not taken that risk. If my mother hadn't given in to my grandmother's nagging. So yeah, I'm really really grateful to be here. I understand that Canada isn't a perfect place. I know that it has its faults, and so does its government. But for what it's worth, and for in my opinion, and from my point of view, it's been oh, I don't know how to describe it. It's a life-changing experience. That's
For
what
the
I would
good.
say.
For the good. I'm
Yeah.
just so happy to hear that. And and congratulations, it's people like Perla and like Flor that have paved the way for you. And I want to get Clayton too in the conversation too as well. I mean, and also to learn more about our Indigenous community and the history too, which is different, definitely. But I'm going to go to Flor now. I mean, Flor, it's amazing, right? You must be so happy. I mean, to hear that.
I'm so warmed by the story, starting from Clayton to Felicity. Um, my story would probably add to that, I hope. Yeah, as when Orly, my husband, and I arrived as immigrants to Canada in June of 1982. Then we had two children, aged 4 and 8 months.
Wow.
By that was in 1982. By 1988, three more were added. So all in all, five children. And as of June 2020, we welcomed grandchild number 7.
Oh.
This time it's a girl because prior to that there were 6 grandsons. You could just imagine. When we came at that time, there was still that assisted relative stream. A few years after they took that away, and people have to apply on their own. Well, of course, assisted by relatives, but the relatives uh, would have very little input into the. Well, there's still points recorded if you have a relative, but primarily the qualifications of the applicant has to be considered. That was true then, but especially so. And then during our time, we didn't have all this expensive fees, immigration fees. You have application fee, and then you have landing fee, and then you also have to have proof of settlement funds. For a single person, 10,000, you have to have that, and 2,000 for every dependent. Had that been a qualification then when we were applying, we wouldn't be here. We didn't have the money. Now, even before, and then 4 years after we arrived, we became Canadian citizens. Even before becoming Canadian citizens, Orla and I were already actively participating in the local community as well as in our church. We found a local church, and on several occasions, even with little children, I was carrying the youngest, the eldest in the family, and even before she was 10, she was pushing the stroller. We attended events in the community, notably at that time, peace marches every June. I remember every June we had to walk, I guess, from Main Street down to the legislative building. So in the mid 90s, Orly and I, we thought we needed to bring news from the Philippines to the community here. So we started the Philippine Times. It was a monthly English newspaper. There were local news, of course, but predominantly the publication was news from the Philippines. Apart from church and community involvement, at that time we felt the need to help others immigrate to Canada. So we've helped a lot of family and friends to fill out their forms, and despite limited resources, knowing the dire financial situation, we had to contribute so they could come over. And at this point, we've lost track of how many we have helped. I made a small count, or a brief count. It's over 30 individuals and families. And it's gratifying to know those individuals and families. Most of them did the same. So you could just imagine how the population multiplied because of that. Perla just mentioned 92 girls came from the Netherlands with her, and from those 92 girls, many of the members of our community were descendants of those 92 girls and the families and friends of those 92 girls. So that's how the community's population exploded. Well, not only, by the way, not only family and friends, we even help even complete strangers. And Sam said that's gratifying. We didn't ask for any monetary compensation for our support, for our assistance. Uh, in and many of them, for the first time, they had no relatives or friends to start with. If they have no relatives or friends, they stayed at our place, just like what Felicity said. Uh, this now that was several decades ago, or at least around 2000, uh, or early 2000, the nominee program came up with the community stream. Before that, we could only help one individual or one family at a time because it's just one family, our family. So I proposed to our local church, what if we join this community stream by the Manitoba nominee program? So I prepared the uh, plan of action, submitted it to our board, it was approved, submitted it to the bureaucrats at the nominee program. They approved it. And in one sitting or in one submission, we were able, through the community stream, sponsor 10 individuals or families. So, and some of them weren't even personally known to us, was just referred by some acquaintances. And they're all here now, beautifully settled. They have their own houses, enjoying good job. The children all attended school. They're doing very well, and we're very happy. That's more than compensated for all our efforts to bring them over. Um, and then unexpectedly, in 2007, I I got elected. I didn't plan to be in politics. Never dreamed of being in politics. I felt in the first place, how could I even win as a candidate? Because I don't have money. Our salary is just enough for the family, and I thought, like, south of the border and in the Philippines, if you were a candidate, you have to have tons and tons of money. So it never occurred to me to be in politics. Uh, but then the premier then, Gary Dewar, sent his chief of staff one afternoon, along with two other Filipino leaders, and asked me to run. And I said, no, I cannot be a candidate. Besides, you already have a candidate. There was a nominated candidate already. But anyway, make a long story short, after knowing the story and after realizing the party will not have a candidate because in 2 days from that time that they approached me, the deadline for submission of candidacy will have happened. So I said yes, and they say the rest is history. I won overwhelmingly, and with that election, I made some history. I was the first woman of color to be elected to the Manitoba legislature, and then also the first woman of Philippine descent to be elected in any parliament in Canada. Uh, so a lot of is I should be uh, doing the best that I could, being the only female visible minority, and I tried my best. in 2 years, after 2 years of being elected, I was appointed to a cabinet position. Again, that was a first because there never was a member of cabinet from the people of color in Manitoba. And I served as Minister for Culture, Heritage, and Tourism. And in that capacity, I became friends with many First Nations and also with my stint as Minister of Multiculturalism and Literacy, I got involved with the multicultural community. I'm so thankful. My circle of friends uh, exploded and from different ethnicities and especially with First Nations, Métis. And to this date, I'm very grateful learning about the history that if it were not for the hospitality and kindness of First Nations, the Selkirk settlers or even the ones before them in other jurisdictions, they wouldn't have survived the harsh winter. And there would never be a non-native population in Canada were it not for uh, people like Chief Peguis and and many others like him who welcomed the foreigners into their land. And so it's a beautiful story of hospitality and kindness. No community, no individual will flourish by themselves. If it were not for if it were not for this kindness. So I think we should be great. Not I think I I and my family were very grateful to be here, and will continue to be passionate in helping others, and those who will come later on will realize that folks like Perla, just like what you've said, did pave the way.
Well, I'm sure and I hope that you pass on all these stories, Flor, to your grandchildren because, I mean, you have a young Felicity here who's now here in Winnipeg. She has you to look up to that she now can go into politics. She can be whatever she wants. And that's been, you know, something that for anybody, right, is to have whatever they want. Whatever their dream is, they can have it. And so I'm going to go to Clayton and Karen because, you know, you've listened now to all of these stories. And I don't know, Karen, if you knew anything about the Filipino community. But now Clayton, of course, it's acknowledgement of the land and of the First Nations peoples and all of that. And it's so much of your history, right, that we have to kind of not only learn, but also learn to understand, to move forward, correct?
Yeah, I find again, even myself when I first came to Winnipeg, I didn't know a lot about my own culture. I sure didn't get it growing up, and it wasn't until I guess probably things like traumatic things that have happened in Winnipeg that I started learning about myself, like Oka in Quebec and you know J.J. Harper and you know some of the traumatic stuff that have happened you know in Manitoba, and then I started learning about myself. I started learning about my history, and I started learning about what I didn't know, and it was terrible sometimes, and I couldn't get over how people can treat people the way they have, and it still goes on sometimes. But I find that when my grandparents couldn't speak English, so I didn't learn a lot from my grandparents. I learned a lot about you know just about gardening. I learned a lot about wild animals and hunting and stuff like that. But and even my parents, I didn't realize that. Well, I knew my parents went to residential school, but my father never shared anything, and he still hasn't shared anything. But my mother, she shared a lot of her experience from Grand Residential School when I was just a young boy, and she'd share all of her stories with us. So when I grew up, I always shared my stories with my grandkid, with my children, and now I do the same with my grandchildren. So they've all, even my stories, even though it's terrible, I think it's important for people just to share their stories and to let other people know about our own personal history. And of course, part of that is your culture and not having your culture. But I find our culture is very very strong now. I find that it's really flourished, and people are starting to all across Canada and North America are getting engaged with their own ceremonies and other cultures. My time in government, I spent nearly 40 years in government. I always joke around. I always say I spent 40 years doing Indian 101. But I sure made a lot of non-native friends and people from other ethnic groups. I made this, I don't know the numbers, but I've made so many friends in the other ethnic communities and the non-native community. Yeah, I just have too many friends to I can even count. But I
Well,
find that, and that's because they got to know me
no.
for who I am, and they, they,
Hmm.
they, they never judged me. And so when my grandson, when when we travel, or he's done a lot of traveling also himself, and maybe I'll get him just talk about some of his own travels.
Yeah, share some stuff with us, Karen.
I've been to a lot of places around the world, such as like Mexico, New Mexico, South Dakota, especially in Rosebud, South Dakota. There's a sun dance that happens every year, but unfortunately, due to COVID, we couldn't go for or since last year and this year, unfortunately. But yeah, I've been sun dancing for around, or I've been going to Sundance for around 8 years, and I started to Sundance for about a year now.
So, kind of maybe
So.
explain for us a little bit about the dance and what has that, how did you get interested in dancing and what has it brought you, Karen, through all of these years that you've been doing it?
Ever since I've been going, I think I've been going for around, honestly, since or for around 8 years, and my mother and a bunch of my other relatives do sun dancing on my mom's side. So last year I saw my younger auntie, Koi. She's only a couple months older than me actually, so she began dancing the year prior to or before I did. So I just decided one year that I was gonna do it, and you basically dance in the sun for or like hot sun for the entire day. And there's some people there that actually don't eat for the entire week,
Wow.
and they don't drink water, and they just dance for the entire week in the hot sun.
So, is it kind of like a cleansing for you, Karen, when you do
Yeah, it's
this?
yeah, it's like a you're supposed to be sacrificing. So showing that you can sacrifice and see how long you can obviously go. And there's obviously a lot of people that have a hard time doing it,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of old folks that do it too as well. Old people from all around the world as well. So they'll travel there, and yeah.
What has that shown you, Karen, about the strength of the human spirit? And certainly has made you stronger, I think, correct?
Yeah, there's a lot of honestly from what I've seen is like really crazy because obviously I didn't do the fasting or no drinking water for the week, but I was there every day to dance in the sun, and but it's hard. It was hard seeing a lot of people obviously sacrifice themselves doing that, not eating, no drinking. So yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. Now, do you share these stories with your friends, Karen?
I only tell obviously I tell a couple of my friends, but obviously a lot of them aren't too interested. But yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? I think it's time that we start opening up. I'm going to just quickly go to Felicity too now. I mean, of course, you're the new kid on the block when you come to school, and all you want to do is just try to fit in and be quiet and make sure that, you don't disturb anything. But you do develop a voice, and it's kind of cool. I mean, Karen has developed his own voice doing these sun dances and other things. for you, now that you're going to graduate, what is your voice? What is your inner voice, Felicity, and how has that changed you?
For a second, I just want to acknowledge the teachings that Clayton and Kieran have shared. I think that's super valuable, just sharing things about your culture, not only to people of that culture, but to people, outside that culture as well, because it's part of learning about your community. And just a lot of people are, if they don't have this information, they tend to be very ignorant, and so they tend to be hateful in turn. And so just that knowledge is so important. So, but as for my voice, it's really funny. Because in the Philippines, I was part of this. I was for over a decade, I think, or almost a decade. I attended this school, the University of the Philippines, and it's really known for producing outspoken activists and people. And so I really like to speak my mind. So coming here, I find that just not even in terms of speaking their mind, but even in classes, people don't really like to speak up. I know that people here, they have really good opinions, they have really good ideas, but I don't think they are encouraged enough to just share. I don't know. I think there is a space for their voices to flourish, but I think maybe it's just something about the culture that's different about that. So when I came here, of course I wasn't as outspoken as I used to be, and so I had to make that adjustment. Like I didn't want to lose that. So I found, as I've mentioned, I've tried to find different community groups where I could be involved and meet new people and, continue to learn and also speak. So right now I'm volunteering with a bunch of Filipino groups. One of them is it's in the process of being conceived right now. We're making a program where we talk about Filipino history, about just making a bridge between your culture in the Philippines and the culture here, finding that common ground. And it's also a program where we plan to do some Filipino activities. We want to make some Filipino food in the program. And so I think that coming here has made my identity as a Filipino person, as a person of color, as an Asian person, it's made it all the more prominent. Coming from a country where everyone is Filipino, everyone is Asian, that you don't think about it that much. But here, seeing all of these differences, it's just natural that part of you becomes more prominent. And so I think that using my voice in this way to help other people who might be disconnected from their culture, or people who just came here like me, and just like me in my first year, I was missing my culture so much and everything about the Philippines so much. Having that connection and having those discussions and conversations is so important, and it just keeps everything alive. I think that I find my voice in my advocacies and finding outlets and communities for these ideas to thrive and to share them and to also grow from other people's knowledge.
Okay, well, Felicity, you have my first vote. Whenever you want to run for government or for any party, you can start your own party. Boy, oh boy. I mean, I think you should run for president, I think.
Oh, goodness.
Yes. Okay, so, I mean, obviously we're moving in the right direction, right, Perla and Flor and
Yes.
Clayton? I mean, if Kieran and Felicity are examples of the next generation, I think, we've done a good job. We've done a good job.
Hope
Pardon? Go ahead.
the hope for the future. They are the hope for our future.
For
But-
sure.
And part of this whole topic that we wanted to talk about tonight, and I know it's dear to Clayton's heart too, as well as the intergenerational stories and how we pass them on. So Perla, you have a very big extended family, and I'm sure you keep everybody together, with your kindness from your heart. But how important it is for you to tell your story, to tell over and over again how you brought 92 girls over and, the hardships, but how, we gave everybody a mom and a dad and a grandma and a grandpa. Those stories are very important to pass down.
I was lucky that I worked with Winnipeg School Division and I worked with young people for 35 years. And that story, I kept on repeating and repeating because I said, who you'll turn out to be is actually the product of all the people you'll meet in your life. And I can say at this point in time that who I am is actually the product of all the people I've met. So I'm a global person. You know, I'm Canadian, I'm Filipino, and I'm everybody else. And I'm in a good place where I'm a co-chair of the Ethnocultural Council, and I deal with people from different countries. And I just enjoy every minute of the time that I spend with them, the understanding, the caring, you know, the support, and the wealth of their culture being shared with everybody. That's something that if everyone can embrace each other, it will be really a big, great world that we have. And at this point in time, also, our community is now 62 years here in Canada. And being with the Philippine Heritage Council, one of the things that we would like to do this coming June, and I'm really glad Clayton is here, because we would like to make that bridge with the Indigenous community. And probably I'll reach out to you, Clayton, because I'd like to come up with an event, a joint event that we can have, where we can have the community together. You know, it's just sad that at this point in time we're still on COVID, but whatever means we have to bring about that unison between our two communities, because it's high time our community, the Philippine community, gets to know the Indigenous community who hosted us, who owns the land that we're in, you know, and a greater appreciation of the community. That's one of the things that we'd like to do. It's coming in June, but and I think I've mentioned this with Sandy Cook, you know, and we've talked about it, and it's something that we really would like to make happen. Um, I know these opportunities we have, and I think we're really going in the right direction. Um, there are humps and bumps along the way, but still, you know, we're heading towards the right direction.
Wow. Well, it was a good thing that we have this show going, right, Clayton? And you know what? I want to kind of mention to Clayton and Karen, you have and pardon me, but I think a very cool relationship. Not to mention that you've got a pretty young granddad, Karen, that does help the matter. But not too many. And Clayton, let's talk about in the community, in the First Nations community, Indigenous community. Is there that same closeness with grandparent and grandchild? And you know, sharing of the stories and sharing of the history.
Yeah, I've often felt that since probably around 1990, I find that there's a paradigm shift in Canada after Oka, and our people started realizing about our own history, and residential schools and abuses were coming out, and I think the Truth and Reconciliation did such a, you know, such a big thing that happening, and the grandparents that I know in the last maybe, you know, 15, 20 years that have grandchildren same age as Karen, we've shared our stories with our grandchildren all the time, because we didn't get a chance to do that with, you know, with the previous generation. But I find it so important, and I find that a lot of the grandparents that I know, they've grown up, their grandkids have grown up in the same environment my Karen has grown up. Like, you know, I quit drinking 40 years ago. I've never allowed alcohol in my house, and a part of my culture about, like, it's very strong. It's important, and you know, and maybe my parents weren't able to do that, but I was able to do that and make a difference. And with my children and my grandchildren now, that alcohol and drugs were never part of our culture. which is so important.
And what do you think about all of this, Karen?
I've just seen what alcohol has done to people, and honestly, it's just terrible to see people that have suffered from alcoholism. So it's obviously not a thing that I'm going to try out.
Well, you got your granddad right there, so no. But I mean that is what this is all about, right? Is setting examples. Flor, I'm going to ask you now because I mean every culture has had some atrocity or has had some barrier against them. I mean, I'm Japanese Canadian, and we all know, or most of us do know about how the Japanese Canadians were treated after World War II with the internment. In the Filipino community, is there that openness to share not only the good stories, but the bad stories too as well?
In our family, we're open. We share the good and the bad, and I think we have to let everyone know the real history. Don't and don't try to hide, because we can learn from mistakes of the past. In the Philippines right now, well, one of the reasons why we left the Philippines in the early 80s, the Philippines was under martial law then, and human rights were being trampled upon, freedom of speech, and the extrajudicial killings, imprisonment of you could get imprisoned or killed if you're criticizing the government. And sadly, that's also happening nowadays. So the Philippines is a beautiful country with so many kind-hearted people, but there are also those who, sad to say, do harm to their fellow Filipinos. I think those stories have to be told, as well as the sacrifices of many who tried against all odds to overcome whatever differences or difficulties. That too has to be broadcast. So yes, there are bad stories and good stories, just like in any nationality or any community. But we who are leaders, or who understand who we don't say we're holier than the others, but we do understand the role of decency. We do understand we have to be people with integrity. I think we should lend our voice. We should not just lend our voice, but do the action necessary to correct the mistakes, present and past.
Yes, that's something I guess we should all learn. Felicity, now, looking at this and seeing where we are in the world right now, and we had mentioned before that you and Karen, you're the next leaders of future generations, and what our world is going to look like, what our communities are going to look like. How important, as now have you spent the hour with these other people, is it to know more about other cultures and educate, young people like yourself and Kieran more?
I think it's the most important thing ever. I mean, it's just you navigate the world based on what you know. And if you don't know the right information or sufficient information, then you will perhaps navigate the world in not the best or healthiest way possible. And it is true that the younger generation is always we will inherit the world, and so that is a big responsibility. And so we have to be well equipped for that responsibility. And to do that, we have to be educated and educated the right way. And so I do agree with what everyone else has said about teaching even the difficult parts of history. A lot of people tend to sugarcoat history, but not everything was okay, and that's normal. And things tend to work in a cycle. History tends to work in a cycle, and if you don't recognize those those bad mistakes that we've made in the past, moving forward, we need to learn from those and bring right the wrongs that have been done. It's not always easy, and there's always going to be errors, and there's going to be casualties, but it's important to try, and it's important to knowing that things may go wrong in the future, and that history may repeat itself poorly. There's also we should also remember that history may turn out to be better. We should always have that hope. I believe that things can change and things can improve, and just education is in that way so important. Like, just even knowing that there's hope, that's also part of education. And so yeah, I think it's the most important thing ever.
Aw. Wow. Karen, what's the coolest thing or takeaway from your grandfather Clayton, and what would you take from your granddad and then maybe potentially pass on to your family when you have a family of your own?
From what he said is obviously really important to me, and I'm obviously gonna tell when I have kids what he's told me about how indigenous people obviously get a lot of racism towards them, and unfortunately sometimes oh, so sorry. Um, oh my God. From, okay,
It's okay.
No
It's all
problem,
right.
no problem.
so from what he's told me, obviously I'm gonna tell my children, and alcohol is obviously not gonna be allowed in my house. Same with smoking, no drugs, none of that in the house. And everything that he's taught me, I'm obviously going to teach my children, and such as being respectful, yeah, just being respectful and all that.
And
Very nice.
yes, I know. And Clayton, for you, you must be a pretty proud grandfather, but still, again, there's always work to be done. Not with your grandchildren, but with the public again, in general, with people.
Yeah, I think it's so important just for people to connect. I find that, I worked in Winnipeg all of my life, and Winnipeg's home, and I've done a lot of outreach to the non-native community. But just in the past maybe 3 years, I've been getting really involved with the newcomers of Winnipeg and Manitoba, and I know their story is exactly like my story, in different ways. But I find that if we can start doing work together, we could probably become a lot stronger. I find that one of my new friends is Hanny from the Immigrant Partnership Winnipeg, and him and I've been doing a lot of work together, and we call each other brothers now. But I find that a lot of times our stories are so connected, but we have to educate other people. So I'm really open to working with other ethnic groups, and I always have been. But I find that it's important just to share a story with whoever who's interested. And some people maybe not be interested in our stories, but I've always believed people are good people, and you'll find some people who aren't. But most of the people that I've connected with are good people, and who want to help. And sorry that we need a lot. Sometimes I look at our history, and it seems like we need a lot of help all the time. But our people are getting stronger, and part of that strength comes from their culture. It comes from going through a lot of hardships, but we've learned a lot, and from the mistakes that have happened in the past, we can correct those, and we can be like Flora, and we can, like, when you look at the government now in Manitoba, like there's so many there's so many Indigenous people in Manitoba and across Canada that are running for office and getting part. And it always amazes me, the young people like Karen and other like Felicia, how strong they are now and how vocal they are. And it's nice to see that our young people are finding their voice now. So that really intrigues me all the time that we have young people like the kids that we have nowadays that are so strong and knowing right from wrong and knowing my history. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, that's great. Perla, did you ever think that this would be what it is today? What did you say? 60? How many Filipino in the community?
Now we're
62?
on our 62nd year, and we're almost 80,000.
80,000.
Mhm.
That is beautiful. And it
It's
is such a
beautiful.
beautiful community. And Flor, I mean, you've been such a pioneer and a leader through this all. I just have one last question, Flor. I mean, your story is, you supported and nominated so many families throughout the years with your husband. Does that still spill through the next generation of Filipinos? Are they still nominating or bringing newcomers?
I think for now it is concentrated on first generation immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know about you, Felicity. Would you be doing the same like what your grandma did? Uh,
I
you're
think
now what, second generation?
I mean, for sure, yes. I realize that I am very privileged to be here today and to have lived the life that I have, to have the experiences that I've had. And so this is something, of course, that I would want to, if I had the ability to help others with, help them experience the same things. And I know that a lot of people still are, looking to get relatives here because it's obviously life will be better for them here, and so I think that's like Tita Perla said, that is a gift, and it would be nice, it would be great to be able to share that.
Oh, wonderful. Then then we can rest easy, so to speak. Even though we'll be gone
Yes. Wow.
eventually, how soon or how late, but if there will be people like Felicity and
Karen.
what's the name of
Karen.
sorry, see this moment, Karen?
Karen.
Karen.
Yeah. People like you, you're our hope, and you're role models in your own right. And when you have your own families, we're sure you'll have stable, strong family because of your character and the upbringing that you were lucky to have. So we need more of you, the two of you, so we can, in our sunset years, be happy and content.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think we have, I guess, sort of maybe answered the question. I think that definitely tradition and culture does prevail. I mean, definitely is ever present in our upcoming generations. And I just really want to thank all of you for sharing your stories, sharing your opinions, and educating all of us. And this is basically what this show is all about, and also to create new relationships. So thank you, Clayton, Karen, Perla, Flor, and Felicity. It's been an amazing evening, and once again, I'd like to give a special thanks for a partnership with Immigration Partnership Winnipeg and Clayton Sandy, our knowledge keeper, for creating this show. So everybody stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you on the next episode of Healing Hearts on May 19th. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll connect with Clayton.
Yes, for sure. Thank you.
Bye now. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye
Take
bye.
care.